Yeah, so I'm Josiah Martin. I'm a advanced analytics consultant here at Softcrylic, and mine kind of involves a little bit of the supervised and unsupervised learning. So it's going to be a little bit different in that sense. It's also going to be walking through kind of this idea of a campaign similar to Morgan, but kind of part of that messaging is going to be a little bit different in that there's not already an end goal in terms of what they're trying to kind of sell. It's going to be a little bit more determined on what we see in terms of the audience bases. So specifically, we're going to get into kind of brand affinity and personalization within that space of those particular advertisements. So I think one thing that's important to note now is kind of the sophistication of corporations. It's very rare nowadays that a company offers only a single service or product. And so rationally speaking, it's not really, we can't really assume that everyone has the same preference and the same product affinity within their consumer base. And a lot of companies have this age-old belief that their target audience, they know what they desire, and they know exactly how to get them to purchase. But in reality, it doesn't always align with how things are, right? And with all the data that we now have available, it's important to kind of take a step back and to think about marketing and approaching marketing from a data-first perspective, right? Rather than assuming what we've always believed to be true about our audiences, why don't we go ahead and prove that? Why don't we let the data kind of reveal to us what we know and what we can find out and discover about our engaged consumers, and let that go ahead and shape the way that we then market and target consumers specifically. So this is precisely what persona indexing and machine learning kind of allows us to discover. And in the next couple slides, I'm going to walk through a case study where this approach was implemented. So in this case study here, we're going to take a look at an imaginary company, Ooda, and they're in the hospitality industry. So they're an international hotel chain with multiple sub-brands or subsidiaries who each kind of have their own target audience, right? So based around things like budget or location, or the amenities that the particular customer prefers. And in this case, Ooda has decided they really want to hone in on two of their brands, Hamra and Bida. And they want to launch an ad campaign to drive consumers to their brand site, and it obviously eventually results in conversions. So the big piece here is deciding which of the two brands that the consumer has the greatest proclivity for booking with, and then going ahead and serving them an ad around that preference. And then of course at the end, in order to kind of measure those outcomes again, we aligned with the business on measuring the click-through rate from the advertisement, and then of course overall bookings in the end. So the first part of the process is really twofold. So the first part is going to go back a little bit to what Vignesh was discussing earlier. We need labeled data in this case, right? We had 120 million site visitors here, so we had a lot of data in terms of people actually coming to the site. What we didn't have was a lot of conversion data, right? And so as you see here, we only had about 500,000 of those 120 million site visitors who actually had transaction history with us. And so that's kind of the first piece there. And then secondly, we need to use the data that we have and that labeled data that we're going to get in order to train a supervised machine learning model, right? Which is going to then allow us to kind of discover those preferences for the remaining 119 plus million site visitors. So in this case, the outcome that we're really interested in, right, is, again, as we discussed at the beginning, we want to know whether a customer has a greater proclivity to book with Hamra or with Bida. And again, we only have about those 500,000 where we've actually seen that transaction history. So based on this purchase history and a few other elements, we crafted a systematic way to basically determine the preference for these 500,000 visitors and label them basically as either having a Hamra affinity or a Bida affinity. And then the second portion, right, is then using, like we said, that labeled data. So the user plus their characteristics, especially digital data and what they're doing on the site. And then that affinity, which we've just discovered for them, right? Affinity for Hamra or Bida. And then we're going to go ahead and use that to train the model. And this model is then going to be able to tease out, right, what are the most important determinants for being someone who prefers Hamra or someone who prefers Bida. If we can go back one slide. Thanks. And then the next step in the process is to use this trained machine learning model, right, to go ahead and predict the brand preferences for, again, that remaining 119 million site visitors. So this visual here is kind of like a high-level representation of what this process looks like, from actually getting to from the place of unlabeled data, right? This data we don't know what that outcome is going to be, whether they prefer Hammer or Bida, and then feeding it through that machine learning algorithm in order to get that output or that that label for them. So starting from the left, really the first piece is we're going to limit to site visitors who don't already have that established brand preference. And the data here has been simplified just kind of for the sake of illustration here. So let's suppose that we really only have 5 variables here, right? So 2 pertaining to gender, either male or female, 2 pertaining to favorite color, and then 1 related to age. And so you can see in the first table here how our 2 users, user 1 and user 2, differ, right? So user 1 is a female, older than 20 years of age, and her favorite color is red. User 2, by contrast, is a male under the age of 20, and his favorite color is green. Again, why a boy under the age of 20 trying to book at a hotel room, it's beyond me. I don't, but it's, besides the point in this case. Clearly, the important thing here is there are some observable differences that we can find between these 2 people, right? And it's up to the model now to determine what that tells us about their brand preference. So the next step is going to be feeding the data into the model, right? Where it takes all the data for each of those rows and what it knows about those users who have already converted, right? And we use that in order to train the model, and it makes a determination. And then in that final step on the right, you'll see that the output is the same set of traits that we pushed into the model, along with 1 new column, right? And this is the prediction for the preferred brand. And in the next slide, we'll kind of touch on what the next step is. So the last step of the process is going to be similar to what Morgan was talking about, right? It's actioning on these predictions that we've made about consumer preferences. In this case, the brand affinity, right? So we've established 2 distinct personas in this case, those who prefer Bida and those who prefer Heimra. But this is kind of the piece that's a little bit different than Morgan's in the sense that now we want to take a look at those 2 distinct personas and kind of look at the summary statistics in the same way, but kind of look at what that can reveal about the characteristics that are specific to each of these users, these user bases, which can be incredibly useful kind of for crafting that content and messaging around this marketing campaign, right? So again, reframing that marketing to be focused on that data-driven approach, right? We're not going to assume Heimra customers are this way and Bida customers are this way. We're going to go into the data and see what it has to say for us. And then finally, after we kind of have that greater, again, understanding of the data in our particular user bases, that we're going to need to break it up, right, into A/B or ABN tests, right? We could have several variants, or it could just be a single one, as it was with Morgan's case. And we're going to have to serve them different content, right? So the bulk of the users in this case should probably receive that specially crafted message, which is based around what we've observed about them and their preferences. But then we should also have that control with a more generic message, or even an ad maybe crafted around the opposite persona, right? Something that serves someone who prefers Hammer, a Bida ad, and see if we do actually see that there's a decrease in that click-through rate. And then this way we can then determine the most effective ad if we ran multiple variants, and also whether there's an overall lift based on, again, serving them an ad that's preferable to them. So this final step for this client we have not yet completed, but we do hope to be working on this soon as kind of that next step with our client in the coming months. And then one additional note is just that if you want to know more kind of about this particular case study from start to finish, then I've linked there to this full case study, and kind of walks through the process in much greater detail from pulling the data all the way up to the activation phase. So that's all I've got for you. And